Ladies and gentlemen, if I can ask you to kindly get back to your seats so that we can initiate this panel, which I have the great pleasure and honor to be chairing. I'm Joëlle Jenny, the Director for Security Policy at the EU External Action Service. Last night, Lise Doucet at the dinner asked this room to vote. She asked, do you believe that the Iran deal will succeed? An overwhelming majority of you raised your hands in a very clear show of confidence in the ability of the deal to work. We now have the opportunity to discuss the deal and the next steps with extremely knowledgeable individuals who I will hesitate to introduce, given how well known they are. And I will be asking them to give their thoughts on what the deal brings and how we go forward. Yesterday, when we heard the Deputy Secretary General of the EU External Action Service, Helga Schmidt, she really emphasized how all those years of negotiations helped build trust, and underlined that the question going forward will be the ability to maintain that trust in the implementation of the deal. It's now my great pleasure to ask Dr. Mostafa Zahrani, the Director General of the Iranian Institute for Political and International Studies, and a distinguished scholar and somebody with also a very distinguished diplomatic career, to give us his perspective on the deal and the step forward. Dr. Zahrani, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks for the organizers, and thank you all to listen to me. I try to be very brief. First, I want to put a new meaning to the deal. I really do not consider it even disarmament or non-proliferation issue is much deeper than that. It is a political decision by many for the sake of humanity. That's the way I look at this. For that reason, I don't say, who loses, who wins, who is defeated, and who is the winner. I talk who is going to help humanity. Those who put more energy, they are the ones who have, more. So that's the way I really look at the issue. So the question would be how we got here. I believe the new mindset in the White House was a determining factor that we got here, and European Union, I put it to be effective factor with all the effort that they put, and that's why we are here. When it comes to Iran, we have to make a comparison between 2003 and 2015. Then you had the same people with the same mentality went all the way to reach the agreement, which unfortunately we could not, and they are now the same people who are there. The election we had, which made Rouhani come to power, was very, very important. That election was not the cause of sanction. It was really for the dignity. The Iranian people were telling the world that we do not deserve our leader to be someone with that type of language. The institute which I work now, at that time, I also was heading that institute when this idea of Holocaust was there, and I was supposed to hold that conference, which I did not, and I had to step down. It means, the people were not really wanted that type of thing. That's really important. And right now, to a lesser extent, the meaning that we can give to this agreement is accepting Iranian rights to a certain point, and also accepting that Iranians are not second-hand citizen of the international system, and that's very important for Iranian whose dignity is always, there. So that's tell us why we are, why we are here. And I think if that is such important, what are the dangers for that? I believe at the technical level, some people still think in the context of absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. That is really a hurtful way of looking at the thing. Confidence is very, very important. If a leader, if a religious leader like the religious leader of us have a fatwa about prohibition of nuclear bomb, this is not really a political decision which can be changed tomorrow. This is something that every other religious leader at that level have to obey, and no one has to criticize it. So this is those strategic thinkers of Iran, those who make the strategic decision also do have the rationale of not really wanting the bomb. We don't have time here to go in this, why we do not need a bomb. So when I say, confidence, this is really important when Iranians are proud of their dignity. So this is very important. Of course, one problem that we have, the commitment of Iran is verifiable, and one can easily verify. But the commitment of the other side is not verifiable, and that's one problem. For that reason, possibly, our leader is a little bit cautious of not to be done. One of the problems that we have is those sanctions cannot cripple a country which has 15 neighbors, but at the same time, it does have some effect. Most important effect is profound corruption, which remained there for the last 20 years. Along with corruption comes securitization of the society by some of those who benefit from this situation. And I don't know, but possibly radicalization also come with this. So this is a very important consequence of the economic sanction in Iran. So those who benefit from these type of things, for sure they don't like things to go the way it has to. And that's one of the problems that we have. Next problem that we have, it would be possibly a very important point. It is American domestic politics. And one problem that we have is that American domestic politics easily can be manipulated by outsiders. I just finished my books last week about role of Israeli lobby in deteriorating Iran-US relation. In this event, they absolutely were defeated, but they are not. They don't stop. When you get the vote through filibuster, it tells you how fragile the situation is. Some of terrorist groups easily can buy some very, very senior political leader through money which they get from, let's say, Saudi Arabia, and it's surprising. So these are some of the things which tell us that we do have problem. The whole issue has been fabricated, the nuclear issue, for long times by the same group. So it is very much possible that those groups who have been fabricating that thing and they have lost for the moment, they will be more active, and we are very much concerned about that group. When it comes to Europe, this is across the board in Iran. There is a consensus that we really count on Europe for their sincerity, for their unification among themselves, and for whatever, was said yesterday. And these are, so we are very much counting on Europe. When it comes to the future, assuming if we had 10 years ago an agreement, I'm absolutely confident that we had a new world, a world much different than what we have. So we lost that years of cooperation together. I think nuclear issue is not a symptom, is a cause. Some people try to say the difference between Iran and international community is geopolitical. It's contrary the case. This symptom, this cause, the fabricated crisis of nuclear issue has been a very, very important hurdle in cooperation between Iran and international community for peace and stability at all levels. And I hopefully, if things go through well, so it is really a profound cooperation at all levels between. For the short term, possibly we still have some problem, but for the midterm and long term, if things go well, we are really talking about a new world in a positive direction. Right now, Syria, let's look Afghanistan, everywhere. And we have missed time in last decade because not making a decision on the right time. We have to tackle with the negative consequences of the decision that we did not make at that time. Possibly common interest is more difficult to understand than common threat. But still common threat itself is very important if we can address. All of the crises across needs cooperation. And I believe that deal paves the way for that cooperation. The agreement, I believe, tells us that we need to create ideas. The agreement also tells us it is possible to create that idea. And I believe those who made it have been creative when it comes to idea. For sure, we have to get rid of the past as it has kept us hostage. And last point, for now on, if Europe in creation of this was effective factor, I think from now on, Europe should become a determining factor, especially due to the problems that might cause things to not to go to the right way. Thank you very much.
Dr. Zarhani, thank you very much. You underlined that the deal is a courageous decision by many for the sake of humanity. You also outlined some of the challenges that you see going forward in its implementations. And you mentioned the importance of trust. I now would like to turn to Dr. Laura Rockwood, who is the Executive Director of the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation, but who also for many years worked for the IAEA in its Legal Affairs Office. And Dr. Rockwood, you have all that perspective on the IAEA. We have heard yesterday from DG Amano that the agency is a technical agency, that its job is to establish the facts. What is your analysis of the role of the IAEA, its ability to be in many ways the guarantor of that trust, which is fundamental to the way forward?
Thank you, and thank you very much for having me here. As a former member of the IAEA's Iran team, I've actually been asked on more than a couple of occasions whether the agency is up to the tasks that have been assigned to it by the parties to the JCPOA and the Security Council. My short answer is yes, of course. The longer answer involves an assessment of the specific demands that are placed on the IAEA. It also compels one to ask some difficult questions and to try to answer them. Will the agency be able to resolve all the outstanding questions, especially those related to the possible military dimensions to Iran's nuclear program? What if it cannot? Will that make a difference? And what are the implications for the longer-term safeguards conclusions? Well, first and foremost, the agency is responsible for verifying Iran's compliance with its Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement, or its CSA. It's an obligation independent from and which will survive the life of the JCPOA. The role of the agency under such agreements is to ensure that all nuclear material is placed under safeguards and none of it, whether declared by the state or not, is diverted to nuclear weapons or nuclear explosive devices. Under such an agreement, the agency has routine rights of access to all nuclear material and all existing nuclear facilities in the state, and to information about that material and those facilities. Now, the modified Code 3.1, which we've heard so much about recently, actually ensures that the agency will receive information about new nuclear facilities as soon as the state decides to construct such a facility. An additional protocol provides the agency with even more information about a state's nuclear fuel cycle and much broader rights of access to verify that information. Iran's agreement to comply on a permanent basis with the modified Code 3.1 and to resume provisional implementation of its additional protocol will contribute greatly to the full and effective implementation of safeguards in Iran. The JCPOA also provides other measures that will help facilitate this task, such as the use of modern safeguards technologies, continuous online enrichment monitoring and measurement, and an increase in the number of safeguards inspectors that will be designated to Iran. Now, verifying and monitoring declared nuclear material and nuclear activities at declared locations is the IAEA's bread and butter. It does it well. The fact that Iran's nuclear program will be considerably reduced should further ease that burden. The challenge will be, as it is for any verification effort, proving the negative. The agency will have to redouble its efforts to verify not only that there are no undeclared nuclear materials or activities in Iran, but that Iran is not carrying out any activities that are prohibited under the JCPOA, such as the enrichment of uranium at undeclared locations or the production of HEU anywhere. If the agency has concerns about undeclared nuclear material or activities at undeclared locations, it certainly may request access through special inspections under the Safeguards Agreement or complementary access under the additional protocol. The JCPOA, as you know, offers another mechanism for securing access to undeclared locations. It's broader in scope, and the agency may invoke it not only to address concerns regarding undeclared nuclear material and activities, but to resolve concerns about activities inconsistent with the JCPOA. And unlike the provisions for special inspections or complementary access, the JCPOA imposes a deadline of 24 days for the resolution of such a request. But it's important for me to point out that there is no automatic exclusion under either a comprehensive safeguards agreement or an additional protocol for access to military-related locations or activities. I trust that the Joint Commission will likewise resist efforts to exclude access under the JCPOA to locations or activities simply by virtue of an assertion that they are military-related. As the DG mentioned yesterday, there's a deadline looming. What is this report all about? Well, as you touched on a little briefly, since late 2002, the Directors General have been reporting to the Board of Governors on the agency's concerns about the nature of Iran's nuclear program. Between 2003 and 2006, due in no small part to the cooperation by Iran, We made considerable progress in our understanding of their program, including the contribution by AQ Khan's Black Market Network. But by 2007, we had become increasingly concerned about the possible existence of undisclosed nuclear-related activities involving military-related organizations. These were referred to as the alleged studies. By mid-2008, we'd received other information. Together with the alleged studies, we started collectively referring to these as information giving rise to concerns about possible military dimensions to Iran's nuclear program, or PMD for short. After 3 years of no progress on these issues and the acquisition of still additional information that seemed to corroborate the earlier information, we provided the board in the now famous November 2011 annex with a detailed analysis of the information available to the agency and how that information served to raise questions about the existence or development of processes associated with nuclear weaponization. Following the election of its new president in mid-2013, Iran expressed renewed interest in discussions on the resolution of all past and present outstanding issues. And as the DG described yesterday, a roadmap was concluded by the agency in Iran in July of this year, which identified a number of actions and deadlines aimed at achieving that ultimate goal in 5 months. The JCPOA incorporates those deadlines and actions, adding yet another step. The E3+3, as members of the Board of Governors, are to submit to the Board of Governors for taking necessary action with a view to closing the issue without prejudice to the competence of the Board of Governors, end quote. What are the possible outcomes? The current plan, as I understand it, is for the DG to issue his report in early December and to convene a special meeting of the board, as I understand it, currently scheduled for 15 December. What's likely to happen with the PMD issues? I'm a little pessimistic about the forthcomingness of Iran on these issues, given its long-standing assertion that the evidence is largely forged and fabricated. I'm also curious to see the impact of Rafsanjani's recent apparent admissions about some of Iran's past nuclear-related activities. But still, I remain doubtful that the agency will be provided with sufficient substantive information to resolve all of these issues. I think the most likely formulation could be along the lines that we used in 2007-2008, to the effect that the information provided by Iran is consistent or not inconsistent with the agency's findings or other information available to it. Perhaps some of these issues will actually be resolved. Maybe others will be described as no longer outstanding at this stage. But I don't believe the DG's report will signal an immediate return to routine safeguards, nor do I think that it's likely to trigger removal of the Iran file from the agenda of the board, simply assuming that the board's will have a continuing interest in oversight in light of the agency's obligation to report to the Council on the developments in Iran for some years to come. Now, what are the consequences for the JCPOA? I simply note that neither fulfillment of the roadmap nor resolution of all outstanding issues figure among the conditions set out in paragraph 5 of Resolution 2231 for sanctions relief under previous Security Council resolutions. So what are the consequences for future verification and the broader conclusion? As you know, the Security Council has asked the Director General to report to it as soon as the agency has drawn a broader conclusion for Iran. How does this normally work? How will it work in practice? Well, once a year, the agency draws a conclusion for each state that has a safeguards agreement in force and transmits these conclusions to the Board of Governors every June. If a state has a CSA with an additional protocol in place, and the agency has seen no indications of the diversion of declared nuclear material and no indications of undeclared nuclear material and activities, and, importantly, any anomalies detected in the course of its verification activities have been satisfactorily resolved, the agency is in a position to conclude that all nuclear material in the state remained in peaceful activities. This is what is called the broader conclusion. But that process takes time. We're not talking weeks, we're not talking months, we're talking years. even with an entirely cooperative state. It's really important to keep that in mind. A couple of other things to keep in mind. The drawing of a broader conclusion does not close the file on a state or provide a standing clean bill of health to any country. Each and every year, the agency must reevaluate the information available to it about that state and determine exactly what conclusions can be drawn. The drawing of a broader conclusion also does not mean that the agency will not address any other issues that give rise to doubts about the correctness or completeness of a state's declarations. That's just simply not how routine safeguards work. Discussions are already underway among the E3+3 elements on a draft board resolution as called for in the JCPOA. But regardless of the political conclusions that may be drawn from the DG's report, I think the board should confirm the agency's ongoing right to follow up on any new information that gives rise to concerns about the correctness and completeness of Iran's declarations. In conclusion, I think the agency is more than capable of fulfilling the technical tasks that have been assigned to it. The most significant challenge facing it will be of an entirely different nature: resisting political pressures and maintaining its technical credibility, as the DG referred to yesterday. The agency must simply let the technical chips fall where they may. It is for the member states to determine the political consequences of the agency's findings. And it is those same states that need to support the agency in its efforts. Pushing the agency in one direction or the other, whether in the drafting of the December 15 report or in the drawing of a broader conclusion, risks morphing the IAEA from a technically credible, independent verification body into a useless tool of shifting political winds. That would inure to no one's benefit. Where will you turn when you need a credible verification body if you throw the IAEA under the bus? The agency can't prevent breakout, cheating, or the development of a nuclear weapons program by Iran. That is not the agency's job, nor is it the agency's job to verify intentions. What its role is, however, is to detect any deviations by Iran from its safeguards and JCPOA obligations, and to deter such deviations through the risk of detection. Is the agency capable of doing that? Again, the answer is yes, with the right resources and the unified support of its member states.
Thank you very much for a very precise description of the agency's role and a full vote of confidence in the ability of the IAEA to deliver its technical mandate, providing that the right circumstances and the right political support are given by the member states. I'm now turning to Dr. Hans Blix, whom I very much hesitate to introduce to this audience. You are, of course, the former Foreign Minister of Sweden. You are also the former Director General of the IAEA. But I think I like most what you have put in your biography for this event, where you said that you are retired but not tired. So, Dr. Blix, we have heard from the two previous panelists what has been achieved. We heard yesterday from the EU High Representative, Ms. Mogherini, that patient, obstinate, courageous multilateralism is the only way forward. What is your assessment of where we stand? What has been achieved? And what are the challenges going forward?
Thank you very much. I will end by agreeing with her, but I will start with telling you how delighted I am to be again in Brussels at this conference that I think is an annual, very important event, and where I'm glad to see so many old friends and so many colleagues. Now, the Security Council resolution 2231, you have talked about the JCPOA mostly, but I've talked about the resolution, all the 104 pages of it. is a major event that should offer a peaceful avenue out of a long-standing controversy which has comprised assassinations, war waged through computer worms, and statements and actions which, in my view, violated the UN Charter's ban on the threat of force. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the resolution is that it was at all possible to negotiate despite many deep divisions that exist. It raises hopes that the P5 might now be able to focus talent and time to isolate and help solve some other urgent and complex issues, like the war in Syria, that has long been nourished by outside powers and an intransigent regime that has thrown a whole population into death and disaster, and that has led to a tragic refugee exodus that overwhelms the neighboring states and now strains the solidarity on which our European Union is based. The dominant reaction to the Iran deal is one of relief. This is true of state parties to it and of Europe that took the initiative to the talks long ago, and where there was never a strong resistance to a deal or feeling of hostility towards Iran. Today, it seems that even the government of Israel is ending its campaign against the agreement, and that the Atomic Energy Commission of Israel, for its part, has concluded that the non-proliferation aspect of the deal is satisfactory. While the deal could and should open a variety of prospects of further conflict resolution and accommodation, it makes two important developments unlikely. The first is an armed strike on installations in Iran. The US administration keeps plans for such action ready in the case of a significant breach of the agreement. But one can hardly doubt that the Obama team is averse to such action. Rightly so, in my view. In 1998 and 2003, US attacks on Iraq sought to eradicate weapons of mass destruction that did not exist. How wise, let alone how legal, would it be in 2015 or 2016 to attack Iran with a view to eradicating alleged weapons intentions? And what would happen after such a bombing? The second development that I think now becomes unlikely, and that I and many others will be sorry to see disappear, is the proposed Middle East zone free of weapons of mass destruction. A few years back, I here said in this forum that a zonal arrangement might offer Israel a chance to ensure that no country in the region, including Iran, would have nuclear weapons or enrichment or reprocessing capacity, provided that Israel was itself ready to do away with both its nuclear weapons and its capacity to produce such weapons. Even though there was a clear quid pro quo in this calculation, it was a somewhat unlikely equation even at a few years back. Today, I think it's bypassed by the deal that preserves a limited capacity, a limited and well-inspected low enrichment capacity activity in Iran, and leaves the Israeli weapons capacity untouched, while most of the countries in the region, for the time being at any rate, remain without fuel cycle activities. Now let me focus on the contents of the Iran deal. It strikes the reader of the 104 pages long Security Council resolution that Iran has committed to a great number of detailed restrictions on its future nuclear activities, for instance on the number of centrifuges, the level of enrichment, stocks of enriched uranium, etc., plus stringent verification. The commitments on the other side are limited to an acceptance of Iranian enrichment of uranium, a lifting of sanctions, and an end to frozen relations. Not very onerous. However, the commitment undertaken by Iran also do not appear very onerous when one considers and looks at Iran's practical needs in the field of peaceful development and use of nuclear energy, including nuclear-generated electricity. Rather, The restrictions apply to a program that had such a size and orientation that many lost confidence that it had only peaceful aims. They seek to make the program commensurate with the practical, peaceful nuclear needs of industrially and scientifically fast-developing Iran. Thereby, the confidence that was lost should be regained to the benefit of Iran itself, but also to the benefit of the region and to the whole world. The Iran deal offers many lessons, but also raises a number of questions. IAEA safeguards, about which Laura talked, play a crucially important role in the deal. If they are to be effective and trusted, the agency must guard its impartiality and professionality, while member states must respect its independence and provide the resources needed. Effective implementation of safeguards can also be facilitated, as the Security Council Resolution 231 stipulates, by, I quote, cooperative efforts, interaction, and an open dialogue between the IAEA and states. Indeed, government may offer the agency information that may help it to focus on relevant issues, places, and installations, and agency transparency will enhance government confidence. It remains of equal importance, as Preamble 10 of the Security Council Resolution explains, that the agency protects confidential information obtained through safeguards. A press briefing at the White House on the 17th of July this year suggests insufficient understanding on this point. A spokesman who noted that a military option remained even after the deal said that, and I quote, targeting decisions would be significantly informed based on the knowledge that has been gained through the inspection regime. It needs to be understood by all that cooperation with safeguards inspection will suffer if states inspected were to have reasons to believe that confidential inspection information would become available to national intelligence. Let me turn to the question of sanctions. While military pressures, like threatening naval actions, if undertaken without UN authorization, can be both unlawful and likely to harden positions, economic sanctions are sometimes a helpful way to induce agreement. The Security Council's imposition and lifting of sanctions are particularly important as they emanate from the international community and must be implemented by all members according to Article 25 of the UN Charter. In the Council resolution that gives legal force to the Iran deal, provisions for the lifting of sanctions are an essential part, and the resolution also covers the eventuality of reimposition of sanctions in case Iran were to breach commitments undertaken. The way in which this is regulated may reflect the political need of the US government to be able single-handedly to snap back, as the expression is, sanctions. It is somewhat puzzling, and I shall try to explain as best I can. A reimposition of sanctions that have been terminated would come, one would naively think, through a new decision by the Security Council. Such a decision could obviously be prevented by lack of majority support or by a veto. To obviate this risk, Resolution 2231 enables any member of the Iran deal, after having gone through various elaborate procedures, to transmit an issue of alleged non-performance by Iran to the Security Council. Within 30 days, the Council must then decide, no, not on a resolution to reimpose sanctions, but on a resolution, and I quote paragraph 11, operative paragraph 11, to continue in effect the determination, to continue in effect the terminations of earlier sanctions. If no member of the Council submits such a draft, the President of the Council is obliged to do it. It is enough then that one permanent member votes against the draft for the resolution to fall, and the curious intended result is that the terminations will not continue. Blissfully, the action will not have retroactive effect to render illegal contracts entered into in the period when sanctions were still terminated. Perhaps I have not fully understood the text of the Resolution 2231 on these points. It is hard to read and understand as the small print that we used to find on the back of our insurance policies. Nevertheless, I register my respect for the legal, linguistic and logical audacity that allows the Security Council to continue terminated sanctions. But for this innovative construction and its acceptance by all P5 members of the Council and by Iran, the deal might not have been achieved. Having said that, I hope the procedure will never need to be applied. Whether it is desirable as a precedent needs to be discussed. Perhaps it is no more remarkable that one single member of the Council can reimpose sanctions than that one single member is able to prevent this. My last point, Madam, is to welcome that patient diplomacy, of which Madam Mogherini spoke, that patient diplomacy has paid. Without the determination of the political leaders in the participating states and the perseverance of the negotiators, Secretary Kerry, Foreign Minister Zarif, Foreign Minister Lavrov, and EU leaders Ashton, Mogherini, and Helga Schmidt, and many, many others, there would have been no Iran deal.
Dr. Blake, thank you so much. A lot to reflect upon, and I'm sure there will be many questions. You have, among other things, pointed to a question you ask yourself of the impact of the deal on the likelihood of a WMD-free zone in the Middle East. I'm sure that this is something that many participants here will have a view upon. You have underlined also the importance of protecting the confidential information entrusted to the IAEA, and you have, I quote, registered your respect creative language employed in the Security Council resolution with regard to determination will not continue, which indeed is a novelty. I would like now to open the floor for questions and comment. I am sure there will be many. I see hands rising. I propose to take a couple of questions, or two or three at a time as they come, so that we can have a grouped answer. I think the first hand to come up was just here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was really great insight. Andrei Baklitsky, Russian Center for Policy Studies, Moscow. But, yeah. Andrei Baklitsky, Russian Center for Policy Studies, Moscow. But I would like to raise a somewhat less rosy issue, the issue of sustainability of the deal. We all know it's not an agreement, it's a political understanding between the parties. And we all understand that, for example, if the next US president decides to walk away, he probably will. There's nothing that could prevent this issue. My question would be to the panel. Do you see the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action sustainable enough to stay even if United States walk away? Because in that case, the Security Council resolution will probably stay in place, as it will not involve all of this painful process of submitting your complaints and then going full way to the Security Council. The EU part of the deal will stay in place, and the Iranian part of the deal, could it still stay in place if Iran decides it's still in its interest? Just an idea to throw to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I then have a question at the very back. I see a hand waving and I can't see a face. So if somebody can bring the microphone to the back of the room, and I will come back then to the front.
My name is Martellini. I have a question for Dr. Blix. Congratulations for your very clear presentation, and also to the whole speaker. My question is very simple. A non-proliferation agreement is also more than legal language. Is also in terms of, spin-off. And one of the spin-off of his agreement, the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action is the civil nuclear cooperation. So the question for you, how much do you understand this civil nuclear cooperation in terms of commodity items, or also in terms of expertise, let's say reorientation of the expertise inside of Iran to, for instance, nuclear medicine or nuclear infrastructure protection? So how much is broader and is bold? Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. And then here, and then I will ask the panel to respond, and then I'll come to a second round of questions.
Thank you, Pierre Goldschmidt, Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. My question is to Laura Rookwood. Laura, you recalled us that drawing the broader conclusion means for the IAEA to draw the conclusion that all nuclear material in a country have been declared in peaceful use. Is it correct that to draw such a conclusion, the IAEA does not need to draw a conclusion that there has never been nuclear weapons-related activity in that state? Thank you.
Thank you. So we have three questions, one on the one for the IAEA and whether there must have never been nuclear weapons in that state, one on the sustainability of the JPCOA should the US walk away, and one on the reorientation of the expertise inside Iran. Who would like to take it first? Dr. Zahrani? Well, Dr. Blix.
First, I agree with the speaker and with Dr. Zahrani that it is, of course, above all a political document. And you may have reacted to my legal interpretations because I'm a lawyer. But the fact is also that political actions have to be dressed in legal form. Many of you refer to the JCPOA, which is a document that is not a treaty. I don't know how to characterize it. But certainly, what I find very interesting in this affair, as in the case of the Syrian affair with the chemical weapons, is that here we have members of the Security Council and a few others. They get together in a group and they negotiate it politically. But then, when it's over, they shift over to the Security Council because that is where the legitimation can occur. The Security Council has the power to decide with a binding effect in Chapter 7 and with binding effect from members of the whole of the UN. I mentioned that. So I think that shifting it over to the legal sphere, legal formalization of it is very important. And that is what we have to go to and where we have to be very precise about it. Now, I appreciate the political effects of it, and I think that Mr. Marani was right in pointing to the importance of dignity. I think in the international politics, far too little attention is paid to the feeling of humiliation and the feeling of dignity in the world. And when I read in the resolution that it says in preamble paragraph 7 that they express their desire to build a new relationship. Well, it may sound a little fluffy, maybe to some, but I think it has very great importance in international relations. So I agree with that point very much. Now, there was another question about the civil nuclear cooperation and the nuclear power. And, well, it's no secret, I think, to you that I'm in favor of the use of nuclear power. I think that perhaps the threat of climate change is an even greater threat existential threat to the world than the nuclear weapons are. They are both pretty bad, but that one is very big. And I have not the slightst doubt that the nuclear power is besides conservation, because effectiveness of energy, perhaps the biggest way we could switch from hydrocarbons. And that was the intention of Iran in going for the Bush reactors and increasing, perhaps not as much as they once says, but anyway, continue to expand. And that is the idea of Abu Dhabi, in building 4 nuclear power reactors on 1,400 megawatt each, and the intention of other countries in the Middle East. So I think that is something that we should appreciate, and that is being helped by this deal. I also think that the ideas that you should have more cooperation regionally on the question of safety, for instance, with the Gulf Cooperation Council, is something that is very desirable, because there is concern, mutual concern, and this needs to be looked after and taken very seriously. So I affirm the positive attitude to that. Lastly, on the question of the conclusion, which Peter Goldsmith raised, the conclusions of the IEA, can they be absolutely complete? Can the IEA draw the conclusion, or is governments draw the conclusion? I have always been of the view that the agency cannot come out and say there is nothing, because we cannot prove the negative. Now, governments, politicians love to have the agency say there is nothing, and then they can point to that. But it's not intellectually tenable. We know Mohammed el-Baradei in 1998 and I in 1997 talked about the Iraqi situation, and we did not say there was nothing. But we said that we understood the program, and we could not exclude that small items here and there, computer programs, etc., still existed. We cannot, Kishore. Even in a state which is occupied, you cannot. The US was in Iraq after 2003. They could not be absolutely sure. They thought there was something. They didn't find anything. They couldn't be absolutely sure. And the police chief in New York cannot, although he has all the thousands of police, he cannot ensure that there's not a bit of narcotics in New York. So it's not intellectually tenable, and one shouldn't ask that to happen. Nevertheless, I think that what has been done is about as much as you can, because the program is followed from the mining of uranium and to the hexafluoride and all the way through. So the agency gets a pretty good view of what's going on. 100%? No, I wouldn't say so. It is the job of the governments to draw that conclusion. I remember well in the IEA when we had the South African doing away with their nuclear weapons. We did not say there was nothing left, but we said this is what we have done. It's professional, it's reliable, and as far as it goes, it's for you to draw the conclusions. And the governments drew the conclusion. They had confidence in that case. Here, there may be spoilers. There may be people who are coming out and say that, look, what happened here, we have evidence of, we have found this message, etc. So there may well be that happening. But I think the agency would be better off in not claiming that, yes, we can give 100% conclusions.
Certainly, Dr. Zarhani, please.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think the question, if next president backs up, what will happen? First of all those countries which have been involved in solving this issue at least for last 2-3 years, they are the one also who have to respond to this question. And that is exactly why I said Europe this time should be a determining factor versus effective factor, which has been up until now because of that prediction. And and of course, Iran, what should do, it's a resolution under, the charter. Everybody has to abide to it, and we really do whatever rest of international community will do.
Do you agree with these evaluations?
Absolutely, without hesitation. And I want to say that I register and share some of Dr. Zahrani's concern about the U.S. domestic situation. Totally personal comment. But as a lawyer, as Dr. Blix is, I turn to the JCPOA and the Security Council resolution, and I suspect that, formally speaking, if the U.S. were to back out and not perform on its side of the deal, Iran could quite legally and comfortably, as could the other members of the Joint Commission, invoke the disputes resolution mechanism. It would be, if any of the E3/EU+3 were not meeting their commitments under this JCPOA, Iran could refer the issue to the Joint Commission for Resolution. Similarly, the reverse is true as well. So I suspect that, no, I don't suspect. I believe Dr. Sarani's response was probably more directly to the point. I think there would be more diplomatic and political issues, but there is a legal mechanism to break this deal, one that I hope never gets invoked. And Pierre, if I understood your question, I believe it is correct to say that in order for the agency to conclude that all nuclear material is in peaceful nuclear activities, it is not necessary to prove that a state never had a nuclear weapons program, because if that were the case, there are a few countries represented in this room that would never have gotten a broader conclusion.
Next round of question. I had one here, please. And again, please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. Tarek Rauf from CIPRI. I had a question for Dr. Zarani and one for my old colleague, Laura Rockwood. Dr. Zarani, how do you justify, or how does the government justify the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in Iran, given that Iran upfront has to take certain measures that in the long term are irreversible, such as, for example, the destruction of the calandria of the Iraq reactor and putting a concrete plug? So that action is irreversible once it is undertaken. Similarly, once the centrifuges are taken out, they're out. And so if there is a failure of the rest of the JCPOA, Iran will have taken certain irreversible technical measures that cannot be reversed. Some of them cannot be reversed, some might be reversed. So how is this sold to the Iranian public, but more particularly to the opponents of the current government and the opponents of this agreement in Iran? And to Laura, you very correctly highlighted some of the concerns, Laura, about the assessment that the IAEA is supposed to issue by the 15th of December on the roadmap. And although the roadmap is linked to the JCPOA, the issues under the roadmap actually pertain to Iran's compliance with its safeguards agreement, because they predate those issues. And as you yourself said, the agency has to provide conclusions. So what is, in your view, the difference between, quote unquote, an assessment and the conclusions? And related to that is, when you and I were working on these issues under the previous Director General desisted from issuing such an annex, and the annex came about once the transition took place. And so the concerns about, quote unquote, politicization of the IAEA sometimes are referred to in this context. And so it also creates the problem that now the IAEA has on how to close or somehow fix the issue of the possible military dimensions, because otherwise the Iranians will not fully implement the JCPOA until the PMD issue has, in a sense, been put to bed, in a manner of speaking. Thank you.
Thank you. I then have a question here.
Harald Müller, Peace Research Institute, Frankfurt. A brief comment and a question. The comment relates to the fact that this agreement is not just legal or technical. It has a very deep psychological dimension, which was alluded to in by using the term dignity. Iran has recognized the need to regain lost confidence, and for that reason to submit itself to a regime that is closely as harsh as the one which Iraq had to take upon itself after a lost war. While the Western partners in the agreement, despite of its asymmetrical structure, took great care to accept a language that breathes equality, dignity, which, as Dr. Zarani said, was very much needed for Iran. That's a great concession and achievement on either side, I should say. The question relates to the point Hans Blix made, the quote of the general who said, "Oh, we can better target after 10 years." Of course, that's not a nice thing to say, but the truth in that is that Iran's partners and the IAEA, after 10 or 15 years, will know much, much more about the nuclear infrastructure, who does what, who can do what, than at any time before. So contrary to what many critics say, we will not be back to square one. after 10 or 15 years, we will be somewhere else, and it will be a very large distance. My question to Laura and to Hans Blix is, am I not right in that assessment? Will we not know immensely more about the inner fabric of Iran's nuclear activities than we do now? And does not the fact that Iran is accepting this growing knowledge on our side some indicator that it is sincere?
Thank you, and I have a question here.
Thank you very much. Ali Vaz of International Crisis Group. While Laura is absolutely right in saying that the JCPOA has not conditioned anything on DG Amano's report on the PMD dossier, which is due next month, but the Supreme Leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, has. In fact, he has conditioned two of the most important steps that Iran is going to undertake, namely shipping out of the stockpile of low-enriched uranium and destruction of the core of the heavy water reactor in Iraq, on the IAEA effectively closing the PMD dossier. So if Laura is right in her prediction and DG is going to come up with a very inconclusive and open to interpretation report next month, my question to Dr. Zahrani and Dr. Blix is, what do you think will be the consequence of that? Thank you.
Thank you. I propose that we take the answers, and then there are a few more hands, but I propose we do a round of answers. Laura, did you want to start this time, coming in?
I wasn't party to this round of negotiations, but Tariq, you asked, is there a difference between assessment and conclusion? I can only assume that in the minds of the drafters there was, or they would have said conclusion. And if you were to issue a conclusion, even in December, if they were traditional agency conclusions, we would almost certainly be able to, I still say we, the agency would certainly be able to verify the non-diversion of declared, but it still, in my understanding, is not in a position to draw any conclusions about the absence of undeclared nuclear material and activities. And I suspect that that is what motivated the use of the word assessment rather than conclusion, though I do not know. As to the difference in approach between Mohammed El-Baradei and Yukiya Amano in terms of putting in an annex the description of the concerns, you know, we're creatures of our past, and Mohammed and Hans both lived, and we lived through the 2003 event quite personally and saw what can happen when reports and information are misused. So it's not surprising that DG El-Baradei was a little bit cautious about that. Having said that, when DG Amano took up the mantle of Director General, he became concerned that we kept expressing increasing concern, and of course, very little was known by most of the membership in the IAEA as to why were we becoming so shrill? Why were we becoming so nervous? Why were our concerns increasing? And again, I can't tell what goes on in the minds of these gentlemen, but I think he was sincere in wanting to make sure people understood that the agency was not being irrational, that it was not being arbitrary, that it had a better understanding of the kinds of information the agency had, and a fair amount of it was not intelligence information. So I think you just have different approaches, different personalities, different backgrounds, and different judgments. And I don't think it is the agency's job to close or fix the PMD issues. It's the agency's job to tell the membership what it sees, what it understands, based on the information Iran provides. Are they able to consider any of these issues resolved? Perhaps. Perhaps. I hope so. I hope Iran understands that the more forthcoming they are, the more likely it is to get the kind of assessment and resolution that the Supreme Leader is actually looking for. There was a question by Harold. Will we know immensely more about Iran's program? I suspect we will know a lot more. We already know quite a lot. We have a very good handle on Iran's extensive civil nuclear program. We will have more information about trigger list items that are imported into Iran, which is always helpful. We'll have more information about the uranium ore concentrate, things that we wouldn't normally under a safeguards agreement. I think if one accepts Iran at its word that it has an exclusively peaceful program, I don't think these are big changes. I think it's just a question of being more forthcoming about information. It will be more information about their nuclear fuel cycle, and the transparency will contribute to the agency's ability to have confidence that nothing's being hidden or stashed away somewhere.
Thank you. Hans Blix.
Well, if I am to remove my legal coat and look at the political angle of these historical questions, of the possible military dimensions of the past, my feeling is that what is needed now and what they are getting, what Laura describes, is a very extensive knowledge in the ages already and a very thorough system, not 100%, but a very, very thorough system of verification for the future. And this confidence, I think, is what we need for the future. At some point, I think Secretary Kerry even pronounced herself slighting the demand for an endless exploration about past events that are not relevant for how the countries will live in the future. It can be alleged that how can we have confidence now if we find that they were cheating in 2003? But after all, the more important is the future and not the past. To my mind, there is something sort of Inquisition-like about this, sort of religious fervor that you must confess. If you had any sins back 100 years, confess them now, because otherwise we will not trust you. Now, it also allows an endless harassment of the future, digging up things. And there has been massive information and disinformation in the case of Iran. So I'm rather pleased that what I think is the solution, that the IAEA reports on the 15th of December, and the board will accept the report. And I hope that will be the end of it. I'm sure there will be spoilers will be out and will not take it at an end. But I think that would be the better solution. Relying on intelligence, if I come back to that, is a tricky thing, and we lived through that in the whole Iraq affair in 2002, 2003. And you have to be very critical about it. Perhaps one of our lucks was that we did not have access to defectors, because they often told their audience what they thought the audience wanted to hear. And we have seen a great deal of information in the case of Iran, and to assess what is true and what is not, or to build on it, yes, this is a very difficult task. As I said in my statement, it may be useful to have intelligence telling you, look at this, look at that, etc. But then to draw conclusions that, yes, we are highly suspicious of this. And let me remind you of the case of the anthrax in the case of Iraq. There were very strong indications, part of it was from intelligence, that the Iraqis still had quantities of anthrax, because we couldn't figure out where it had gone. And I went pretty far in January 2003 in voicing these suspicions, and they kept being a factor for me. Well, after the war, it turned out that when the people were able to speak without fear of Saddam, it came out that they had buried these quantities rather near Saddam's palaces. And it was not a very nice thing for them to confess this while Saddam still was in power. So that was an explanation. But again, it brought us very close to say that, yes, we are highly suspicious of this. I didn't say it existed, but I think it points to the need for a very great cautious attitude on the part of the agency.
Dr. Zarhani.
Thank you very much. There are different hypotheses why a country goes to nuclear. None of them applies to Iran. One specifically is pressure of the public. So the assumption in Iran, about Iran, should be that Iran does not want to go to a bomb. Not the public, nor the elite, because of so many reasons. If that is the case, Iran in 2003 accepted only symbolic enrichment and to make a deal. For that reason, right now, if the Iranian people and also the elite, they are very proud that for the first time they have accepted the right to enrich on Iranian soil. This is the bottom of what they have wanted. Rest of the things, all of it could be negotiable. So that's one point. The opponent, of course, are there for many rational, for many reasons. Not all of them logic, and not all of them stupid. Some of them do have their own logic. They are really very much, concerned. But the fundamental thing when we talk about average Iranian people is that they want to be part of international community. That's fundamental in the Iranian psyche. For that reason, they trust the leaders, especially when you talk about Zarif and the others. More important point, this nuclear agreement or deal or whatever name it, proves applicability of this political system. I'm talking about the rule of jurisprudence, a faqih, a grand ayatollah ruling the country, If we had not such a leadership, for sure the tension, political tension among the opponents and those who were supporting the deal would be much deeper than, where we are now. And that's, I think, important factor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have 3 or 4 more hands that were brought up, so I propose to take those last round of questions and to give the floor one last time to the panel. There was one question here, this gentleman saying there. I think you need, no, that's in front of you, yes. Do you have a microphone? Does somebody need to bring you a microphone?
Yes, I do. Thank you. 2 questions. One is, presumably the JCPOA and UN Security Council 2231 are a package. And at the same time, Iran doesn't recognize the legitimacy of 2231 and has already violated it on 3 issues. One is the testing of a nuclear-capable ballistic missile. The second one is on a travel ban. And the third issue is with respect to arms transfers. How are we supposed to handle those 3 issues and more to come to retain the integrity of the deal? The second is with respect to the resolution of the PMD issue. True, the bar has been lowered to require of Iran to answer some questions and for the IAEA to acknowledge that Iran has actually answered those questions. But we all understand that the IAEA Director General is on record as having said that the building was significantly modified, and we are led to believe that the answers are saying yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. What I'm trying to understand is what are the broader implications and the precedent that is about to be set if on that basis that evidence has been withdrawn over a decade or more, we then say we put the issue to rest, we don't pursue it further. Or alternatively, we say, okay, it's enough to get the JCPOA going and to remove sanctions, but the issue will remain under active consideration. Thank you.
Did any of you understand or the question?
His question was,
Sorry, we're just clarifying exactly the meaning of the question among ourselves. Yeah, and could you give us your name again, please?
Yes, it's Ariel Levita from the Carnegie Endowment.
Thank you. There was another gentleman a few rows in front of you who had been asking for the floor. I don't know if somebody can bring him a microphone, please.
Yeah. Can I speak here? Okay. My name is Eli Carmon from the Interdisciplinary Center in Israel. We heard from Mr. Zahrani about false affirmations, provocations, pressures on the American government. I think that we should remember that the Iranian government cheated all the long time that this project began. The Natanz facility, the Fordo facility were not declared to the IAEA. They were presented by opposition members or by intelligence services. Just before the last elections, then candidate to presidency, Mr. Rouhani, appeared on a TV interview show, and he said that he sarcastically to those of his opponents, you know, when I negotiated with the Europeans in 2003, 2004, there were only 170 centrifuges, but I succeeded with my way of negotiating to have 1,700 centrifuges. So what exactly should we believe about the Iranian real position? And contrary to Professor Blix, I think that history is also important to understand the future. Now, Professor Blix spoke about the fact that he proposed many years ago a kind of denuclearization of the Middle East, and that if this plan was accepted, Israel could live in tranquility and peace. But who threatened, since its inception, the very existence of Israel, if not Iran? Until 1979, Iran did not threaten Israel. Only the Islamic State of Iran threatened Israel for destruction and used every proxy in order to attack Israel. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I have the gentleman here with a question.
Thank you very much. And allow me to introduce myself. My name is Dr. Daria. I'm a university professor and also Deputy Director General at the MFA of Iran. So I really appreciate the presentation that I received from the three distinguished panelists. If you allow me, I just wanted to have some comment. First, whether this deal is political or legal. I believe, because I published my second book on this negotiation and this deal recently, I believe that this is political, legal, technical, very complex agreement, which has many psychological effects. So I think it's very, very unique situation. We have done almost 240 days of hard negotiation to reach to this text with 5 annexes. Image changing in publics, and also the issue of national pride and dignity was the consequences of this deal. So if we want to have a comprehensive analysis of this deal, we have to pay attention to all aspects of the deal. Let's not forget that after 35 years, John Kerry and Dr. Zarif sitting together, talking very directly on the concern related to this issue. And then I think that's in many issues we had several personal engagement on the issue. So each and every paragraph has a very long history. Whether we would have difficulty in implementation, it depends on the approach that may be adopted by both parties, because it's the first exercise for trust building. And I think trust building is two-ways road. And it would be interesting that in the text of the JCPOA, we have many quotation which encourages the faithful implementation and avoiding unhelpful statement, which might affect the implementation. And I think I agree with Dr. Hans Blix about the destructive role that certain statement might play, especially if there would be a perception inside Iran that the US might follow a hidden agenda. So if we want to have a deal, if we want to have engagement, let's be clear. Engagement means that you have to move in a direction that contribute to the trust. And I think that's one of the main important issue. On the issue of a snapback, we call it, because Tarek Rauf raised this question, a snapbacks, we call it survival clause. Some of the measures might not be so easily reversible, because I don't want to say irreversible, but it might take some time, but it's a survival clause. So if we fail in this test, there is opportunity for both sides to come back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will take one more question, but I will ask you to be extremely brief in the interest of time. Please, here in the front row.
Thank you. Bob Einhorn, Brookings in Washington. I guess this is a question for Mustafa about something I believe the Supreme Leader said. I recall his having said that any imposition of new sanctions by the United States for whatever reason would be a violation of the nuclear agreement and would justify Iran halting its implementation of the deal. But in my reading, the JCPOA does not preclude the imposition of new sanctions for non-nuclear reasons, for example, abuse of human rights or something like that. Now, I think it's very likely that at some future time, the U.S. will impose a new sanction, designate an individual or an entity for a non-nuclear reason. Now, the question is, would this be considered a violation by Iran? Would Iran stop implementing its own commitments because of that? It seems to me this statement by the Supreme Leader, and tell me if it's accurate, is a real source of potential instability for this agreement over time.
Thank you very much. In the interest of time, I will ask the panelists to just pick 1 or 2 points that they would like to respond to the breadth of comments and questions that you have heard. And if you will, Dr. Zahrani, I would like to ask you to take the floor first.
All right, thank you. Just to, I think, only last question of Bob Einhorn. You know, I tried to say in my talk that Iran's commitment is verifiable, but the commitment of the other side cannot be verified. And as you and me were talking, it is those new sanctions which is being talked about in Washington is exactly as a spoiler to get provocation from Iran and then stop the deal. My analysis and my interpretation of what the leader is done is 2 things. 1, we have to have also something to verify the other's action, and this is a preemption for not killing the deal. That is my judgment about that.
Dr. Rockwood.
I think Ellie raised a couple of questions that were probably more on the order of a comment than a question. You were concerned about the visit to Parchin, if I understand, and the broader implications of the agency having raised concerns and if they aren't addressed. I think the issue of Parchin, frankly speaking, it got a little bit hijacked the process. Back in January 2012, when we resumed our discussions with Iran, we had a number of issues. There were 12 from the November annex that we wanted to discuss with Iran, one of which was Parchin. And we thought that would be an easy fix because it was one of the few issues that did not involve reliance on any intelligence information. And so it went to the top of the list, and unfortunately we never got past the top of the list on that. Query, even if the agency inspectors had personally gone in and taken the samples, at this point it's a powerful tool, but I'm not sure they would have found anything. Anyway, I think if you see that as a precedent, I think you would have to argue to other states that they would have to be similarly situated, and I don't see this similar situation arising, at least I hope not. In terms of how I don't think the agency can do anything more than report to the board what Iran has informed the agency of, and whether that helps in resolving some of the issues or alleviating some of the concerns. I personally don't believe it is absolutely essential, and I think it is extremely unlikely for Iran to do more than Rafsanjani has already done, which is indicate that at some times that they thought about it. I don't think it's realistic to expect an admission of guilt at all. So I think there will have to be some judgment made by the member states of the agency. Is this good enough? Is this good enough for what we want to achieve? And I think the issue of precedent is always something that needs to be considered. And this is one of the reasons why I would encourage the Iranian officials to do as much as they can to try to help this process along.
Dr. Blakes, if you want to give us the answers and also maybe your final thoughts as concluding remarks to this panel.
Well, I'd rather be modest and first answer a question that I failed to answer a moment ago about the statement that had been made linking the targeting to information coming from safeguards inspections. It was a statement made on the 17th of July this year by a White House spokesman. I'd be glad to give a copy of what I have. But then I would like to turn to the question of confidence. I remember it was said that safeguards must be based upon confidence, and I reacted against that and said no, they are not based upon confidence. They are carried out in order gradually to create confidence. Of course, that was a bit categorical reply, because you have to have a certain confidence that things will work, that they will receive your inspectors, and the framework will work. Even that can break down, but you have to have such minimal confidence. But gradually, it's a question of confidence working. Now, it's clear that in this controversy, there is a depth of lack of confidence in the past, and it continues in various quarters. And that will only, I think, gradually be overcome by the application and correct application of the Security Council resolution. And I think there is a will to do that. I think I quoted what resolution says in preamble paragraph 7. They talk about their desire to build a new relationship. Now, that is entirely political, not juridical. But there is such a wish, and as I stated in the beginning of my first comment, there are lots of things that could become different in conflict resolution and accommodation if that is taken seriously and to build upon. There will be many spoilers, many who will perhaps not have confidence ever, but there is a wish, I think, as I see, behind Security Council resolution, and that gradually will build up the confidence. I think Iran is a very different case from North Korea. Irani says that they want to come in again in the international community. They've been frozen out from it for a certain time. North Korea is not located on the Silk Road, and Iran is. And therefore, I think there's a good deal of veracity in what Iran says that, and I think we need that. The help and cooperation with Iran could make a lot of differences in the Middle East. And that's the way I will hope that we shall see the future.
Thank you very much, Dr. Blakes. Thank you to our two other panelists for the insights that have been shared in this session on the legal dimensions, on the technical dimensions of the deal, but also on the psychological dimensions of the deal. You have underlined the importance of dignity. You have underlined the importance of the deal, of the safeguards mechanism to further support establishing confidence and trust. We shall watch to see how the time goes forward in what Dr. Zarhani has called a deal for the sake of humanity. Thank you very much, and I think you will join me in a round of applause for our panelists. With this, do you want or shall I go? Very good.
Well, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the 4th EU Non-Proliferation and Disarmament Conference is coming to an end. It has actually been the largest of the 4 big conferences organized by the EU Non-Proliferation Consortium, now on annual basis. We had here around 300 participants from some 60 countries, and a number of relevant international organizations such as OPCW, IAEA, NATO. And actually a mix of participants was also very diverse, coming from different backgrounds, different regions, more than half of the countries from outside of the European Union. And the conference covered a broad range of topics, so I think we are justified in concluding that with this event, the European Union has provided a useful forum for in-depth discussions among officials, experts, and civil society from around the world on the most important current issues of global non-proliferation and disarmament, which are a very important component of international security. It has actually been mentioned by many during these 2 days of discussions that the international security environment has worsened in recent years, especially compared to the over 2 decades following the Cold War. From our place here in Europe, certainly this is the case, regardless of whether we look to the east or we look to the south. We do notice new challenges, new risks, or even threats. And by talking to many of you from other regions of the world, like Asia, I have noticed that you have similar observations about your own regions. Now, the challenge with which we are struggling is that different individuals, institutions, or even governments draw different conclusions from this new security environment. To stick to our portfolio of non-proliferation and disarmament, for some it is the reason to strengthen the role of military means of armaments, including in some cases nuclear weapons, in their security policies. There is talk of new arms race or even new arms races. For others, it's a reason to be a little bit more cautious on some of the high-profile disarmament initiatives which were prominent in recent years, as the Global Zero Project or President Obama's Prague Agenda. Yet for others, this is actually the reason to speed up, to add urgency to disarmament and arms control efforts, to seek new instruments of confidence building. I think a number of these initiatives have been discussed here during this conference, and the diversity of these 3 approaches has been demonstrated also here from the European continent. Where the European Union stands on this. I mean, first of all, we put stress on effective multilateralism. We put stress on the existing legal instruments, treaties like the NPT, CWC, BTWC, and on supporting the organizations which are charged with implementing those treaties. So the stress on universalization, universality, and effective implementation is something which the EU supports. And we do this in a very pragmatic spirit, as demonstrated by the negotiations with Iran, which I believe have been one of the main themes of this conference from the very first remarks by the High Representative to this excellent panel which was just concluded. I think that there are certain signs of hope, and there is a certain momentum which needs to be sustained, a certain sense of optimism after the Iranian nuclear deal, which maybe can be carried over to other fora, other instruments, be it to the next year's review conference of the BTWC, the newly created open-ended working group, or other fora, entry into force, for example, of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. And together with my colleagues, I am very much hoping that you are leaving Brussels now with new energy, new faith, and new ideas. If this is indeed the case, then it is thanks to the excellent team from the EU Non-Proliferation Consortium of think tanks, which has organized this conference. So I'd like to thank here the consortium team headed by Mark Fitzpatrick, but especially two people, Matthew Coty and Stephanie Love, the staff here at the hotel, but most importantly, to thank all the speakers, all the panelists, all the participants who have also taken the floor and contributed to very rich discussions during this conference. So thank you very much, and I hope that we'll see each other in Brussels next year.